So we sent our son off to college, and he came home with schizophrenia.
Now our family's searching for the cure.
But in the meantime, this is how we're functioning.
I want to talk about what can happen. Father, mother, creator.
Hey everyone, and welcome back. So last time we left, we were, I called it a cliffhanger. Okay, we're not filming a movie, but we were talking about the initial onset of schizophrenia and what we went through, right? Mm-hmm. And we left it at, where did we leave it again?
We left it at he went back to college.
Back to college.
And this time was asked to leave.
Yes, yes.
And the reason why I want to go back and talk about, of course, I want you to get to know us and our story, but really the goal of really focusing on the diagnosis and the importance of it is because getting the right diagnosis, you talked about getting it early, right? And you'll give them some coaching on that here in a moment. But getting the right diagnosis is going to determine so much of your future in what services are available to you. So really, for us, that was a really important time, and
getting it early too.
Yeah, and getting it early. They talk about that. Yeah, so we gave him his herbs. We sent him off to college, and we thought,
we had taken him to the herb shop.
Ashwagandha is going to save everything, and I do believe
at
in
least
ashwagandha.
Help him sleep, right, or something.
I believe in ashwagandha, and yet, no. Interestingly, it didn't save everything.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So he was sent back from college, which wouldn't it be interesting to get the file? I was thinking about that. Like we were so caught up in what our experience was, it didn't occur to me to call the college and say, what has happened? Like I did call them and they said that he had a consistent roommate.
And I would have wanted to speak to them and get I want detail by detail. What happened? What did you see?
Yeah.
I'd even love to talk to the roommate.
In fact, I think
if we could hunt them down.
I was going to say, but I think that is we'll do a podcast on that where I want to actually talk to college. I don't know what college is, but eventually we're going to explore that because we do know that the onset is typically college age for boys and a little bit later for girls, but for boys. What? So
maybe our audience will help us and send us a story about your situation. You're dealing with schizophrenia in the early onset of it with your family member or friend.
And if anybody happens to work for one of the universities, and would like to join us on the podcast, it would be we would be thrilled to have you. Yeah.
So, we're going through this. He's back to college.
Yeah. So this time he was asked to leave, and so he went back to his godfather's house.
And I think I was on a fishing trip too.
Yeah.
So I had to come home for my fishing trip. Because he's coming home, so I had to come home.
Right?
No,
I think he went back to his godfather. Well, maybe that was a different,
Oh, no.
There's been a lot of, been a lot of,
it's been 20-something years.
As you guys know, there's been a lot of interruptions, right?
We've got 20 years worth of stories.
Yeah, exactly. But in this particular case, he went back to the godfathers. And the reason that I remember this specifically is
when he came home from college, right?
Yeah, we came home from college. And I think he was just kind of flailing about there for a minute. Like, okay, you came home from college. What are you going to do now, right? And we still kind of weren't certain. We knew for sure that it wasn't drugs, right, because of the referral that we got. There wasn't a drug addiction. So for us, guys, we're still landing at that. You're a hardhead, and you need to get your crap together, right? And if you're not going to get your crap together and work here at your godfather's, then you're going to, we're going to kick you out and put you out in the world, right?
I
think that was the conversation, right? You got to work, and I worked since I was 16 years old, and so will you. That was kind of how we were approaching it. But instinctively, I think the godfather started to suspect that there's more at play here than just a bad attitude. And he would try to tell me stuff like, but the kid's doing this weird drumming. Like he'd be in the basement where he was at, where his room was. And he said, he just drum. And I'm like, so he's practicing drumming. What's the problem?
He's going to be a musician, right?
And he's like, no. I mean, when a kid just sits there and hits the same drum over and over and over again for an hour, you start to go, this is weird. So it was just those little weirdnesses that you're like, okay, something's not right. And I think his next complaint was that he would come upstairs kind of out of nowhere and be like,
he would be downstairs, right?
Yeah, he stayed in the basement. He'd come upstairs and go, wait, what were you saying? Did you call my name? And And the godfather would be like, no, I was just sitting up here watching, no, I didn't call your name. So those kinds of, and then he started getting really irritated, remember, because they lived in a duplex, and he started going, your neighbors are really obnoxiously loud. Like I can hear them through the walls. That's the first one, right? And can't you do something about them? They're pissing me off. Can't you go talk to them about being,
Right.
So those kinds of weird things. And then, so I think those were the weird things that made him kind of maybe know. And that's that weird, like, how do you know? Like it's like, what actually happened that made the hair on your neck stand up, right? So,
And keep in mind, we have the Godfather that's part of this early onset.
Yeah.
And he's seeing it before we see it.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So he's kind of reporting to me this over the phone, right? So I'm giving you the play-by-play when I'm there, and I'm getting the play-by-play. And he's going to grandma's, because grandma, everybody, the whole family is still back in Minnesota. And everybody's kind of calling, reporting these sightings or situations that they're experiencing with our son. And, again, not really... It's weird. Like I said, it's hard to describe.
And you're not there, right?
Right, exactly.
So
it's
you might
like,
even be thinking, well, what's wrong with them? He's fine.
Or really, I was like, no, he needs to man up, and you guys need to put him out, right? He needs to get a roommate, go out. And they're like, so that was probably one of the biggest problems. But when I got the actual SOS call, and this one came in from his godfather's sister.
Well, wait, what about the Godfather's house? Are you going to come back to that?
Yeah, that's what we were just talking about.
The other thing he was noticing. And,
Oh, yeah.
He didn't see it happen, but
the
the
you tell it.
refrigerator.
Oh,
something
yeah.
with
So,
the refrigerator.
yeah, those are some of those little weirdnesses, right? You tell me about the refrigerator.
Well, I mean, we know that he just, the Godfather, he came home and he saw dents in his refrigerator. He had no idea how those dents got there, but one thing he knew was that refrigerator was brand new.
Brand new.
Yes.
And he's like, I think he punched it. And the Godfather's a bit of an analytic, so I'm like, how do you know he punched it? Did you measure his?
Did you see a knuckle print?
Did you see knuckle prints? But anyways, so those kinds of just weirdnesses that you're like, again, kind of like what we had experienced up until then. Is this a hard head? Is he just, what a lot of kids, a lot of young males, I don't know this personally, but, get upset and, punch things. That's what I've heard.
A lot of young males do this.
Do they? I don't know.
If I did, but it's been a while.
I hear young males get energy and punch things.
Not everybody owns a punching bag. So
Right. You have a punching bag, so you don't have to punch things.
Don't punch your furniture, okay, or appliances.
Punch things, yes. So anyway, then finally, I get the SOS call from the Godfather's sister, who said, there's something really wrong here. And my brother's having a hard time with it, and he's not able to talk to you about it. And I'm telling you that there's something really going on here, and we're going to need you back here to deal with this. This is too big. And
Did she ever say what she noticed?
No, she never. No.
I know some things happen at the sister's house, but
that was
did she
later
ever say?
on. No,
Right,
because
that
this was
later.
new, right? So he's reporting back to her, and I think she started to see the stress and the worry. And this goes back to that isolation of not really knowing what's wrong, and kind of these little bit of, I guess, maybe that's even the beginning of the stigma, right? Because everybody wants to report, yeah, my son went off to college and he's doing good, and
Straight A's.
he's killing it, you know what I mean? And he's the basketball, point guard, and so when you start to see some early kind of missteps with your young, it's your tendency is to cover it up, which is probably what I was doing with you. Like, I'm not going to tell you every misstep.
Yeah.
It's hard. So
Again, I wasn't in on the first early onset conversations.
Yeah.
Right. So I was.
Were you getting
in
a
one state? He was in
play-by-play?
another state. I was getting the play-by-play.
yeah,
Exactly.
a filtered.
She was filling me in. She was filling me in.
Yeah, there's a filter in there, but and I was too, right? And it took his sister to give me the unfiltered. There's some problems here, and so I scheduled an emergency get to Minnesota, because I took her. She's an RN too, by the way, so she's a nurse, and I respected, and she loves my son, so I knew that it was important when she said that. So I went back there, And this time, did learn some really alarming things, like the Godfather found a gun in the house, found some notes, back to these strange notes, right? And it took me right back to the dentist had something to do with it, something
Right,
about.
when he handed you that private
Yep.
note.
So he found some notes, found like his social security number written down, just like bizarre, things that you're like, okay, what is actually going on here? And so once I found out about the gun, and I started really doing some research, we need some help here. And but it was actually it was my son that, after going out to dinner, and he was just getting on my nerves because he was just agitated and weird. Then he'd get upset when you'd be anywhere with him. Why is that person looking at us? What is, what's going on? And, just that he became just an agitated dickhead. I'm just not gonna lie. I was like, what? Okay, I'm dropping you off, right? I can't deal with this. And I tried to drop him off, and he just looked at me so scared. I saw fear in his eyes, and he said, Mom, aren't you looking at me? Don't you see I'm in trouble here, And I was like, okay, I see it, So that's when I started doing I really, put it into gear, and we found COPE. Yeah.
We found the COPE team. Now let's
Yeah.
talk about COPE.
Yeah.
Now COPE, they're based out of Minnesota.
Yeah, I didn't know
Right.
that. We're back to Minnesota is the best at mental health.
But it's got to
Go
be
ahead.
some similar,
You'd
something
hope.
similar in each state, or hope, or
You'd
maybe
hope.
a next door neighbor state,
Right,
something like
right.
that. But COPE, COPE, is it's a community outreach for psychiatric emergencies. COPE, COPE, and they provide emergency intervention services 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, when an adult is experiencing emotional crisis that threatens their personal safety and threatens the safety of their family as well. So it's very important to get help. Again, we go back to getting help. When you notice this, getting help right away is very important.
Yeah, and that was it. So just having a number like that we could call. And yeah, first when I called them, they too were like, what? He punched a refrigerator, That's not anything to worry about, right? Or
Yeah, and they're
or
very
he's
leery of
drumming.
violence, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So, for them, I think, and they probably are overworked, so they filter out a lot. And I think about, I don't know where you're at politically, and I'm not, this is not about that, but when the whole upset in Minneapolis came up and they talked about defunding the police, the only thing that came to mind for me was the COPE team. Because for me, they're angels on the street. They've rescued me and my family when it was a very difficult time. So I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. And you're going through that, right? Yeah. And I'm still in Arizona at the time. This story, there's so much to it, so many intricacies that, I have not made the trip there yet. So I'm kind of waiting for the signal where it's time for you to get here. But in Minnesota, I was talking to my folks and asking questions, just getting a little bit of the information. Now, this is before we knew the word schizophrenia, right? That was attached to the situation. But I was telling my friends, talking to my buddies and stuff, this is what's happening, this is what's going on. And of course, all of them are like, well, you just tell him to stop doing that and to get it right and get straight. And if he don't do this, you kick him out and he'll figure it out once he's on the street. And I'm like, okay, that's the way we used to handle it. Now I'm listening to this advice, but I don't know yet the diagnosis.
Right.
So this is this is the old school advice where people just say, get it straight or move out. And
honestly, didn't we wrestle with that? It's like part of you, because we were raised by those old school people, that get it together, or that new school. And that's where a team like COPE was really helpful. Because believe me, if it was just him being hard-headed, he would have ended up on his butt, right? We didn't play that at all, right? So and so it was really COPE. They came, and let me tell you, so I talked to them, and I finally, when I was able to, because it took a couple of phone calls with them, right, for me and them to come to the conclusion that, they should come out. And what they did was they met the Godfather and I at a local coffee shop, Caribou, and just kind of got some information, and and they spent a lot of time with us. It was like an hour and a half of, figuring out who we were, what the situation is, what they may be walking into in there. So again, back to, that whole defund the police conversation, that's a long time that they're spending with us, and a lot of training that they had around, and they were educating us the whole time through, here's what's going to happen. We're going to talk to him. Here's the couple of outcomes. Because again, we have no idea what's going on. We're like Babe in the woods out here, right? We have no idea. And yeah, with this gun that's supposed to be out there, we were, of course we were afraid. So.
And obviously the Godfather must have been afraid.
We were all afraid.
For his life, or just afraid in general. I don't know. I wouldn't say for his life, but afraid that something's going on. It's here in my home. And I always think, if something's in my home going on, then now it's more internal, right? Now if you have this going on with someone that's living with you, now you're locking doors, possibly.
Right.
But when you wake up, the situation's still going to be there.
Right, you're facing it, and it's funny because in it, you're afraid for yourself, you're afraid for them, you're afraid, even back to the police being called, you don't want that to be an incident, right? So you're afraid for them that way. So it's just, so the COPE team was really amazing. They knew all about how to handle the situation. They made phone calls right there from Caribou, right? We're calling and secured a spot at the University of Minnesota. That was the hospital at the time. And so then then they followed us over to the duplex where my son was. And let me tell you, getting him to agree to go with me down to the hospital was, I cannot describe the hell that it took to do that, because he's apprehensive, he's agitated, he's looking at these guys. Who are they? What are you doing? Mom, how did you get these guys in on it? What are you guys doing? What's your conspiracy? That's when you really started seeing, and you didn't know, is he gonna run? But I was afraid for him. It was insane. So it probably took another hour and a half of negotiating and getting in the car and then jumping back out of the car and going in the house. I cannot describe to you the insanity of getting him in that car, and even the whole drive down to the hospital. What are we doing? Who are these people? Are they following us? It's like,
Yes, we've seen that in other situations, right? In a much older adult in the family, but we'll get to that later.
But, so finally, thank God. And again, when you go to the emergency room, as you can imagine, we don't have an hour to sit and wait in the ER waiting for our name to be politely called, So back to, COPE kind of having their path in. They were there? Okay. They came with us, two of them, the moment we got to the hospital. They escorted us back right away, and they put us in a room that locked. And not in a, straitjacket kind of way, but we're back behind. And for me, once that door locked, I kind of calmed down a little bit, feeling like, okay, at least he can't run,
And I'm just the opposite. As soon as I hear a door locked behind me, I don't like that at all.
But I'm gonna tell you, having your family member out there, I don't know. So I don't know what you're looking for. But for me, once and we were sitting there very quietly, once I think maybe he was okay. Interesting, he was, having all this energy about getting there, but once we got into that quiet room, it was just him and I. We were sitting down, the door locked, and we were just sitting there, kind of in a regular waiting room. It looked like a regular doctor's office waiting room, but it was locked. And he just got quiet. And me, I'm like, are you okay? You know what I mean? I'm kind of really dialed into what's going on with him, but he was very quiet and calm.
Yeah, so I'm thinking, okay, now we're in a hospitalization situation. I'm still getting the play-by-play, right? And I realized that we're becoming advocates in training. We're learning how to deal with someone that they haven't, was the diagnosis there yet?
No.
So we didn't have the diagnosis yet, but schizophrenia. So now we're learning how to deal with this and also wondering what's going on with our son. So it was like everything was just piling on, right? We just had a cup that was full of the situation.
I mean, really, you're in, I guess, a version of almost fight or flight. I call it anxious relief, right? So you're in the hospital, but you still don't know what's going to happen. And I don't care what reason. Anytime you take any family member to the emergency room, you have that anxious, feeling, right? You don't know what's going to happen.
It's for any of us, right?
Anytime
you have to go to
any
ER,
illness, you're like, what's going on?
You're like, and the first thing we always think is, okay, how long is this going to take? And I know from visits and being there in ER, it's always the worst that goes first, right? So when you realize, well, how important is my situation? I can't imagine.
Well, when they escort you right back, you realize very quickly,
yes.
That the COPE team recognized he's got to go back right away.
We're going to put him in the front of the line,
right?
Get him back there.
Yeah. So we're sitting quietly in this room, and I'm glad you mentioned advocacy because, I was an advocate in training in that moment because we were sitting quietly, and we were probably there a good 20 minutes where it's just quiet, him and I. He didn't have anything to say, and I didn't want to say anything because, believe me, I was exhausted by what it took, the mental exercise of fighting to get him there. So I think we both just needed a break. So we're sitting there quietly for a good 20 minutes, and all of a sudden, out of the blue, 2 security guards come barging in. I mean, one of the guys was really this big dude. Mm-hmm. And the other guy was like a regular sized guy.
What's regular?
I know, right? Not a big dude.
I hope I'm regular. Okay, go ahead.
But this guy was huge, and he busts in, and he goes, we can do this the easy way, or we can do it the hard way. And because it just was so like, what? It was really intense. Yeah. And I stood up, and I was, I think, instinctively more worried. I didn't know what he was going to do. You're ready to take on the big guy. I mean, mama bear, right? So I'm like, and it just was so jarring, and I didn't know what I was going to do. And you're right, I did. I stood between him, and I said, hello, and the guy goes, we're going to need his belt, and we're going to need his shoelaces, and and he just starts belting out these, and I just was like, okay. So I calmly turned around and I said, son, I think what he's trying to say is, and I just talked to him really calm, because remember, he was already like, what did you get me into, right? And this is his first experience of what I got him into.
And he's not on any medication.
He's not on any medication. Right. So I was really like, and it was funny because the other security guard or officer, I think recognized very quickly the difference, right? And he was like, yeah. And he started then reinforcing what I was saying in a calm way to my son. Like, yep, we're not going to do any, nothing to be worried about. It's just that we're going to need your belt and your shoelaces. And I then explained to him, it's not because it's just that some people where you're going, they may be thinking about hurting themselves. Mm-hmm. I know you're not, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Talking to that ego, you guys know what I mean by that.
Mm-hmm. But that male ego.
Right. Yeah. But it was just back to that initial, advocacy and training. And I don't know where that came from, whether it was Mama Bear or just, a de-escalation, which I would have thought, I don't know. Mm-hmm. I'd love to have a conversation with that officer after. Right. I mean, was that necessary? Is that how you have to come at people? Or
there's so many early people we'd love to have conversations
right?
with.
Because you're just surviving it.
Right. But so they bust in. They're demanding all these things. Give me your belt, your shoelaces. Yeah. So after that.
Yeah, I mean, he handled it really well. He took it off, and
which I'm shocked.
Yeah, he was interestingly. Once we got back there, he was pretty calm. And then they said, okay, we're going to take him upstairs and get him situated in a room. Give us, a little bit of time, and we'll call you, and you can come up. Mm-hmm. And they did. They took him away. And I was, back to that just anxious relief. And I think that's when I called you, because I'm like, that funny feeling. I don't know if you've, when you had your knee surgery and you had to be carted away, and you're like, okay, that's a VIP. That's your family.
And this is the point where you can't go anymore. Yes. You stop here, and they continue with the individual.
And you don't know what's going to happen. Mm-hmm. And so I remember that just feeling But yet I was relieved, to be there for sure, because I knew we didn't have what it takes to help him outside.
No, and the Godfather didn't either.
No, we
Definitely
didn't
didn't have what it
No.
took.
So I think that's when I called you, and it probably got really real, right? So I called you to say,
Yeah, because there's so many stories. Like, you reminded me of when you were taking him there and he wanted to get out the car.
oh, gee, I'm telling you, hell, getting
'cause
from
that's part of it, right?
this 20-minute car ride was the worst car ride I've ever been in.
Wanting to get off and get out at every stop.
At every stop.
Just
I
let
should
me
get out here.
Yeah.
Just let me out. This is ridiculous.
We
Why
said
are we
that at the
going
same
here?
time.
We're saying the
Let
same
me
thing.
out. Let me out.
Let me out. Let me out. Yeah. So, and I called you, but the thing that just really stood out for me and that anxious relief, right after that came this weird isolation, that my family member was just carted away, if you will, into the hospital. And I didn't feel like I could tell anybody, right?
Except
it was
for me.
like
So
I
now
called you.
We're out on this island.
Right.
You're isolated. Like, from what we know in our past, you don't talk about this.
Right.
Right. Now, I can't say that. I can't say that's for you. But where we come from and where we grew up, it's like, nah, you want to keep that quiet. They're, like I said, back in the day, literally, you start out by saying, they're crazy.
Right.
So what do we do with crazy? We usually try to stay away from them. Mm-hmm. But when it's your son or daughter, now you're in it.
Yeah.
You're in the trenches, but it still takes time. Obviously, we came a long way because when it first happened, right, we can't talk about this.
But, and I wonder, why do you think that is? Like, why was it so instinctive? At that point, I hadn't told anybody, so nobody said, should we keep it quiet? But yet instinctively.
I can see that with some prominent family that wants to keep their family, stuff to themselves, right? Not put it out there in the public. But you would think that you talk about it. And again, this is how we started out. Now, we're here talking about it with you. But you start out by, first of all, you kind of refine it and say, okay, who can we talk to?
Right.
And then, fortunately, like, you had a good friend, Dr. Feelings.
Yep. I had some good
place
friends.
to start. And advocates just kind of, they come to you when the situation is right. The universe just brings you the right people.
That's true. And really so back to that, his aunt, the nurse that said, come to town, there's something big here that we're dealing with. She was a good support source early on. And so once we got him into the hospital, I kind of gave everyone an update, the Godfather and you. And she gave me some advice. She said, take his blanket, it'll calm him having something familiar, So I went and I
don't know why you just reminded me of Peanuts and Linus with his blanket. I don't know, but that just popped in my head. It's a comfort, right?
Said that then, actually.
It's comforting, right? It's comforting.
It is.
Your blanket that keeps you snuggly and warm all the time. Yes.
And believe me, somebody who traveled 200 days in a hotel, even hotel sheets and blankets, that's why you sleep so well at home, because the blankets and
you're at
your
home.
sheets are warm.
Feels
and
good.
She wasn't wrong, right? So I did. I took his blanket there, and I think that night he slept well. So I think he was safe, and so I was able to give everyone the update. The next morning, I think, is when I went there. So I went up, I saw where he was at. He was fine. And then the next morning, I took the blanket there.
Mm-hmm. How did that work?
And the next morning.
Oh, that's when you saw him the next morning.
Yeah. Okay. So the next morning.
I'm just gonna step away while she tells this story. No.
That's when things got really, really weird. So, and back to when you were talking about the onset, and you said that stress, right, will spark certain, I guess make it worse, or I can't remember what you said. Yeah. But so the next day I went into the hospital, and now remember, these people don't know us at all, right? So I walk into the hospital, and my son was speaking gibberish. I mean, complete gibberish. And they said to me, oh, well, we're going to get a translator because we don't have anybody on the floor that speaks Spanish. So they looked at my skin tone. They assumed, right, that I'm Mexican and my kid is speaking Spanish. And I'm like, okay, couple things. This brown skin is not because I'm Spanish, right? He's, we're biracial. He's African American. And that's not Spanish that he's speaking. it's like he was speaking in tongues or something. It was the weirdest thing. And he took his white T-shirt, put it on his head like a turban, and was speaking gibberish.
And keep in mind, all this time, you're in the psych ward, right?
Yeah.
And again, think about it. He has schizophrenia. Now he's not only enclosed, but you're locked in.
Yeah.
So all those things are, to me, they would be like, something that would agitate you.
Yeah.
if
That's what
you
I'm
have
thinking.
schizophrenia. It's not going to make it better, right?
Did it stress him out more, right? And at this point, he hadn't had any meds, right? So because the 72-hour hold, which, I think we're going to get into a bit later, but yeah, the idea that he's speaking gibberish and it freaked me out. And they were trying to convince him to maybe take a med that would calm him down. And the thing that freaked me out the most was he said, they asked me, they said, well, can you, sorry, I'm going to go all over the place, but back to this advocacy where I'm thinking, if I wasn't there, they'd be thinking that they had
they would know how to communicate.
A Mexican person that was
and
speaking
how long
Spanish.
Would he,
How long would that have gone on before they realized that who their actual patient was? So just this idea of the importance of having an advocate and what happens to people who don't, that's alarming. But
and if I was there, it probably was best that I wasn't because, as we talked about earlier in the show, we're bringing a sense of humor, right? A sense of lightheartedness to a very heavy subject. So if I was there and he started speaking gibberish to me, I might have started talking something back to him thinking he's just messing around.
Right.
Until and this is the way he is, because if he's not joking around, it's really a straight-faced, or he just disappears where he's not even responding. So it's probably better that you were there. So you go in there, he's speaking this gibberish. He's got the
gibberish.
thing
He's got
wrapped
a
around
turban
his
on his
head.
head. I'm like, what the heck am I looking at here, right? And to make it even more alarming is they asked me, they're kind of take me to the side, we had that whole, he's Spanish, so we need to get somebody to translate.
An interpreter in here.
An interpreter. I'm like, that's not going to help you. But then they were like, if you could help us, because at that point they didn't want to force meds, so they said if you could help him take some meds that'll calm him down and allow him to rest better. So I went into his room, and he said, he looked me dead in the eye. And I tell you, that's the most disturbing thing that I've ever experienced in my life, to tell you the truth. When your own son looks you dead in the eye, as close as we are right here, and says, Mom, is that you? And I was like, yeah, son, it's me. And I could tell he couldn't recognize me. It was a very, very disturbing scenario.
Part of the hallucinations or not seeing you as who you are.
Yeah, so I didn't know what was going on. So,
and that's probably more than likely part of their protection mechanism.
Of course, yeah.
Am I being,
right.
tricked here, or maybe he heard the voice, but didn't recognize the face,
right? I could tell that he could not recognize my face. Like he really wanted to know if that was me.
Which is another subject all in its own, like getting deeper into the hallucinations.
What do these
not just about
do?
them, but what are people seeing?
Yeah.
People that have schizophrenia, what are they seeing when they have hallucinations?
Yeah, and really what was going on with his brain with that gibberish talk. And then we can even have a conversation about the spiritual aspect, because, is it tongues or is it, gibberish? I don't know.
And we had a moment the other day. So she was, when we were talking about this episode, and she's telling me about this gibberish. We got to that point. And again, just a reminder, I wasn't really on the scene yet. So I'm getting play-by-play information. I'm still in a different state. But so the other day, I'm trying to get her to describe this gibberish. Like, well, just what does it sound like? And she's like, I don't know. I can't say it. I'm like, no, just remember when he said it. And she said, yeah. I said, no, duplicate that and say what he said. She's like, she took probably another 30-second pause. I think she did a circle around the house. Came back and said, "I don't know how to duplicate it." So I was really trying to dig in. So I was like the TV interviewer that was really trying to get the information out of the interviewee. And I said, "No, really." So we're probably 5-6 minutes into this. I'm trying to get her to say this gibberish, and I just could not get it out of her.
Nope. Because I couldn't. Well, first of all, he's the entertainer.
And I think she could have. No, I
I'm
think
not.
she could have, but she wouldn't do it.
I can't. Whatever. I'm not going to.
Can you do it right now? Just a
no,
little?
I cannot.
Okay, see.
You do it. You speak gibberish. For
No,
a
I don't
moment.
speak gibberish.
Well, what do you think speaking in tongues sounds?
That's what I wanted to know.
I don't know that either, so I'm not.
But you heard it. You were there.
I'm not doing this.
She's not doing this.
I'm not doing this.
Well, then that's it. I'm done with this.
Well, so let me finish by saying that I was grateful that he did finally take the meds, and he trusted me. I said, I think you're going to feel better if you take the pills.
Mm-hmm.
I can't lie. I felt a little bit like, did I just give my kid the Matrix pill, the blue pill?
You don't
he
know.
took it hesitantly,
Mm-hmm.
But and you're just trusting the process, I guess. You're
Yeah.
trusting the doctors and to do the right thing. But I can't lie. He took the pill. I stayed there with him for a while, and then he finally went to sleep. It's a tranquilizer, clearly. He fell right asleep very quickly.
Yeah, and in part 3 of this series, we're going to get into
Yeah,
the medications,
the meds
which it's going to blow your mind.
Yeah.
Okay.
But and really that day, I think everybody was grateful for the meds. So I try not to always demonize them. There's good sides and bad sides to it. But the thing that really stood out to me is I left there, and I'm somewhat of a spiritual woman, and I felt afraid, and I felt evil about. That's all I can describe, right? So I get back to the hotel, and at this time I hadn't told my family. I'm in my hometown and was in a hotel by myself because I kind of couldn't tell anybody, right? I'm still in my isolation. You're not there. I got back to the hotel, and I called my friend, who is a spiritual woman, and I said to her, I feel like, is the devil about? I'm so like something's going on. And she goes, and I'm thinking she's going to say, oh no, honey, you're fine.
Stop acting like
right.
that.
She goes, oh, he's definitely there. I'll get the Bible. And she did. So that night I sat in my room, and again, she was one of those angels that
Mm-hmm. No,
read the Bible.
and I know it had to be a tough situation to see, because even to this day, I feel like he goes through different personalities. Not that he has a personality disorder, but he goes through different types of personalities, and I feel differences.
Oh yeah.
In the personalities. In other words, I can almost I call it dark mode, and when I say that, it's you're talking to him, there's no answer.
Yeah.
You're looking at him, he's looking at you, but he's not looking at you.
Right.
You say something funny, there's no expression. So again, I'm always trying to bring some type of levity to the situation. And it's rare, but if I feel anything negative or bad coming from him, I always try to use levity. But one thing I don't do and will never do is say, hey, stop doing that.
Right.
Because one thing you don't want to do,
you don't want to poke
I
a
feel
bear?
like you don't want to do with people with schizophrenia is, putting them down and making them think that they're wrong. Because one thing we know is that the individual, our son we're talking about, has a lot of pride.
Yeah.
And, we'll talk about that way later. I know us being men, we're competitive, but his competitive nature is different only because I think that, and don't get me wrong when I say this, I'm just trying to phrase it the right way. I think that he's losing at so many things that he needs a win.
Right.
Quite often.
Yeah, and when people are, and that's anybody, when people are sick and they're down on their luck and down on their circumstance, nobody kicks a dog when they're down. I mean, nobody what do they say? Don't poke a hole in the wound or whatever,
Don't
right?
poke the bear, however you want to put it.
Yeah, and so, yeah, I feel grateful that, as somebody said, is the pill it? And I'm like, no, he took the pill, and I needed some prayer that day. So, I mean, and we're going to get into the whole 72-hour hold, I think, in the next episode. But that was just our, getting through that initial finding help, I think.
And maybe next time we'll find out, since this is the end of this one, did the Bible work?
Wow, I always believe in prayer.
All right. Well, that's it, everyone. Right?
All right.
Stay tuned.
You.
We'll see you next time on Functioning. Take care.